So, it got a bit windy out in the Solent, so we've come into my spiritual home, which is the River Hamble. And ironically, as we're going up the Hamble really slowly, because you're not allowed to do more than 6 knots, I can point out my local pub, which is the Rising Sun. It's not the closest one to my house, but it is a beautiful little pub right next to the river, so I can spend a long time in there drinking water, obviously, and being really sensible. The Hamble, for those of you who are unaware, it's a lovely little river. It's probably sort of one of the main central yachting areas for the UK. It's a beautiful place to live. I'm enormously lucky. It's also the home of the 1980s classic Howard's Way. So for those of you who watched crap television about 40 years ago, you might recognise some of this. Anyway, this is not a tourism thing for the River Hamble. What I'm here to do is I'm just going to give a little overview of data processing tools. Now, you've got your data, you've collected your data, all good, you've got it stored, super lovely. You need to do something with it. And so there are loads of processing tools out there, and this is really all about trying to make sure you get the right tool for the job as ever. Covering off this in a 5 to 10 minute video is impossible. So I picked out sort of 3 main sort of segments, if you like, which are fairly common and also probably on most IT people's agendas where it comes to buying tools. The first one is something called an ETL tool. It's extract, transform, and load. Okay, so let's work through that. What an ETL tool does is it will take information or data from one of your storage types. So let's say it takes stuff out of Excel, let's keep it simple. It will then transform that, so it might change all of the dates from English to US format. It might change all of the names to be fully uppercase. It might do a lot more complicated things than that, but you get the drift, yeah? But that transform stage is really taking it, if something's in one format, just making it a bit more usable for another format. And then load is, it takes that transform data and puts it somewhere else. So that ETL tool extracts, transforms, loads. At the end of that process, you've got data from one place to another in a format that's usable by a new application or data store. So ETL tools are commonplace, they can be expensive, they range massively in functionality. Your IT guys really need to do a lot of research on which ETL tool they should use for extracting or go through that process. And the reason being is not all ETL tools will extract from all places. So you need to make sure your ETL tool has the ability to extract from, in my crappy example, Excel. But if you want to extract information from Salesforce or SAP, you need to make sure your ETL tool has the ability to interface to that. The other thing is, fundamentally, the load side of things, you need to make sure the transform and load piece is creating or able to support the format that you want the output to be in. So data in, data out, different format. You need to make sure your ETL tool works correctly. Now, sort of the 3 big ones in that regard are Informatica. They are a big IT company. They have something called Power Center. That's probably their biggest selling ETL tool. It's fairly common, been around for a very long time, very mature. I wouldn't say necessarily market leader, but it is certainly up there. You've got something called Talend. Now that is a suite of applications that do things around ETL tools. And then IBM have got products such as DataStage and others as well. So there are big IT companies with ETL tools. I've made them sound very, very basic. They can get very complicated, but if you script the way that works, you can automate a lot of really clever stuff. The next sort of data processing piece is really things like what I've termed as batch processing. So this is taking a look at data in a way that allows you to automate a process that will do something with that data to make it useful. So if you've got massive amounts of data, it can take a really long time to convert data from one format to another or do something useful with it. And these days, we've all got so much data, it's actually really important that we consider the amount of time these things take and the amount of processing power you need. So batch processing is the process of you're doing it in batches, obviously. And that means you can schedule it to work overnight, you can schedule it to work when people aren't using their computers so much. So having tools that understand how to schedule things and how to manipulate data in a way that does batch processing gives you the ability, that's one of my favorite boats, gives you the ability to do some clever things with scheduling your time and using your computer resources effectively. So in that context, there's probably 2 or 3 main brands. Apache Hadoop. Hadoop is a massive brand, very, very trendy about 5 to 10 years ago, still trendy now, and gives you a whole framework of how to set up data processing jobs and make those things work so you're managing your data correctly. Apache have also got a product called Spark, open source, more of an analytics engine, so it does large-scale data processing around big data sets. And there's something called Flink. There's plenty of others that you can use to process information in a batch form. The other thing is you can write your own. Batch processing, getting someone to code a piece of software to actually do some clever stuff with your data is pretty commonplace and actually not too, gives you a bit more control. So in batch processing terms, from a procurement perspective, you can buy tools, obviously, or you can code it yourself. Probably worth having a bit of a make versus buy discussion with your IT team, but obviously they'll have a view on which tool they want to use. And the final thing, I'm not so familiar with this sort of final category, but I've sort of pulled it out because I think it's going to get more interesting as things go by. It's something called stream processing. So unlike batch, where you give you set up a job to process a load of data in a big lump, stream processing is where you effectively do it by transaction. So you take individual transactions, you say, right, okay, I've got a piece of information here, I want you to convert it from English to French, made up application. So you send one transaction to a stream processor and it sends you back the answer. Now, clearly that works a lot quicker, it's very good, but again, because it's probably based on per transaction pricing, at procurement level, you need to think about how many transactions, all the stuff I've mentioned before. But those stream processing services are probably better if you want real-time data to be converted. So on a website or in a high intensity application where you need information to be up to date as quick as you can, those stream processes are beneficial because you can get things done, converted really quickly. Similarly, for you to build, if you've got a massive swathe of data come through your application, you wanted it to be converted really quickly, some of the stream processors would have enough capacity to probably deal with that peak of demand, very similar to all the cloud conversations we had a few in the previous videos. So that is stream processing and what is there. Some of the things that products you can use is a product called Apache Kafka that has a whole framework around building real-time applications and real-time streaming data that interfaces to your applications. Apache also have a product called Storm, very sort of computation-based system that does some data processing as a result of that. And then Google have Dataflow. There are other things called TensorFlow. There are all these sorts of different applications that you can buy. And like I say, there's not enough hours in the year to list off all these different products. But from a procurement perspective, your IT guys need to lead the charge on deciding what they want it to do. And then they probably should actually select the product as well, because it's quite a technical and detailed thing to look at. And you just need to focus on the commercials, how much is it going to cost, how the charges are levied, and making sure that if you're using the cloud, as ever, your data is secure, etc. Data processing, massive area. There's no way I can cover it. I keep saying that. But fundamentally, at procurement level, your IT guys need to decide what they want. You need to make sure you understand the contract so you don't get massively overcharged and you're not leaking your data all over the world.